Jane Mitchell Brown, and I am the daughter of Eugene's oldest son, Eugene. I'm his younger daughter. My older sister lives in Fairbanks, Alaska, and this is my sister. There are two of us.
And I'm Virginia Lynn Hampton. I am the youngest daughter of Mary Isabel Leedy and my sisters.
I'm Kathy or Catherine Hampton Schwartz, and I am number 3 in the family of Mary Isabel Leedy and Calvin Hampton.
And I'm Isabel Leedy Hampton Morgan.
And you are?
And I am number 1 as far as age with these girls and sisters of mine. I'm the oldest.
And I'm Nancy Hampton Kraft. I'm Mary Isabel's second daughter. And my father is Calvin Hampton.
I thought this story was interesting. We heard about the Purdue Drum, how long it took him to find heads when he was,
Right.
I guess it was a competition, was it, in those days, who could make the world's biggest drum?
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, in the making of that drum, my mother, who was young yet, can tell every day when their dad came home for dinner, they asked him, "Did you find the hides? Did you get it?" And they always wanted to know the latest on that big drum. So
Because
it was
he talked about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't he finally find the hides in Argentina or something?
Yes,
Or
yes.
He didn't travel there, did
he
he?
didn't know.
He must, I don't know how he heard about that.
Do you guys remember?
I know that Eugene would call home and ask
Yeah.
and say,
And
We're going to
break
bring
it
home so-and-so.
4 o'clock, could we put a couple plates more on the table? And he always had musicians or company presidents. He entertained a lot of different people.
The Green Brothers.
Yeah, one time there was an all-girl orchestra
Oh,
that came.
yes, the all-girl orchestra. Grandfather liked them.
He was having a good time, wasn't he?
There
I
was
can't remember
Eddie
all the
Peabody
names.
was a famous banjo player from the Boston area, and that's how he got started making banjos in the 20s, was because Eddie Peabody wanted a certain banjo, and that's how that got started.
And I heard, like, I think he maybe had John Philip Sousa.
John
on
Philip Sousa.
at the time.
He played in his band
Oh, okay.
some when he was touring as a
Mhm.
young man. He played in a lot of different orchestras.
What were some of the other names?
Was it
They
Paul
talked
Whiteman,
about.
maybe? Paul Whiteman. like-
Oh, well,
yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
Paul Whiteman.
And Paul Whiteman was a particular friend of his, and he was a real showman. And I think, our grandfather was kind of a quiet, reserved man, I believe. There might be those who would
From what
say
we
other.
hear. I wish we had known
But
him.
Paul Whiteman was a wonderful friend, and he sold a lot of drums, I'm sure, with his big orchestra, and he would come to visit with his big, long car and attract a lot of attention in the neighborhood. And our mother, who was old enough to notice that, really loved seeing Paul Whiteman because he had a great big emerald ring on his
yes.
finger. And she always paid attention. She talked, till she was an old woman about that wonderful ring. But all the kids got to spend some time there, and Mother loved the hide room. The worst department of the entire factory.
Smelly hide room.
And she loved going there, and if her father got wind of her being there, he would shoo her away.
Also, the children's elementary school was right across the street from the factory.
Oh, okay.
And
He befriended the school by doing little mechanical work for them, and he knew the principal, and he would go over and help them out or give them small gifts, do things that he could do.
Wow.
think that there are four categories that I think about in their lives, their personal lives. One was education was very important, and music. My grandmother Leedy played the organ in the church before they were married. Actually, she grew up in the same town where he lived. I don't know if you all know that, but
Across the street.
yeah, and we have been to see the house where Grandfather Leedy lived. Some of us have. And then there's what else? Yeah, the food. Food was really, really important to both Grandfather Leedy and Zoe. We called her grandmother. They had a lot of fun shopping for it at the city market. They always talked about the big bins, barrels of things, and the cheese and all that fish.
Caviar and what
Yeah.
was his cheese?
Oysters.
They loved shopping, and Zoe was a good cook. And it said, I think she told someone someone mentioned recently that she had a French grandmother that she learned from. So, and what's the fourth thing?
Klinger Lake.
Oh yes,
Clearly.
the fun part. Since none of us were born before Grandfather Leedy died, we just had hand-me-down stories.
And, well, on one of these trips coming home from Klinger Lake, the Winterhoffs had a car also. And they were big touring cars to hold several people because there were 4 Leedy children, and I think Mr. and Mrs. Winterhoff had 1. Anyway, they were full cars, and they had to take all their belongings with them. And our grandfather would call the smaller, maybe cheaper cars, what?
One-lungers.
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 Because they didn't go as
I
fast
talked
as
about the
his
one-lungers.
touring car. And he sort of made jokes about the lesser cars. He was proud of
And
his.
he wanted to pass the one-longers.
Yeah, he always wanted to make sure he got it.
And one day on this trip home, he said some fool just lost his tire. And it turned out it was his own tire. It was going in front.
Passing in front of the cars, yeah.
So they laughed about that for a long time, but it was on one of these trips where he had to stop and patch the tire. That was forever job.
Yeah.
And they had to crank, I guess, the front of the car, maybe.
To start it.
And his hand slipped and he got injured, cut badly, actually. And that was the end of his professional playing days. He didn't play after that. He gained the use of his hand, but not the fine motor skill that he needed. There is one thing I'd like to add about Eugene, which I call him since I never really knew him. As the president of the company, he cared so much for his employees. And in those days, there was no insurance, really. When you became ill, everything was cash on the barrelhead to get. And when his employees had an accident or somehow be in the hospital, Mother went with him on 2 occasions to visit. He would go and visit those employees, and he paid the bill for them. He was very thoughtful in that way. He always hired musicians because it was a tough life for a musician then. And I think it was in the 20s, might have been before that the union came in, and that was particularly difficult for him because he didn't like anyone telling him what he could do and not do, probably. So I think he was a real humanitarian to his employees.
And when he died, the musicians union, I guess it was, or it was a group of musicians that he knew wanted to play at his funeral, and the union said, no way, can't do that. So I don't know,
unless they were paid.
so then I guess they got paid.
Well, I
I
don't know.
don't know either, but anyway, it's too bad that a man that was so generous in the end couldn't accept those things.
We missed out, I think, because we didn't know him. I think, but I wish we had. But.
Oh,
we're thrilled.
That is
Yes,
wonderful.
we are thrilled.
That's wonderful.
I actually have been up there reading everything. I'm still learning about.
Right.
Um,
Thanks to Harry. He is our adopted brother that we never had, and so
he's been so generous.
he is just, yeah, he's wonderful.
You know Harry.
He tells us more stuff that we never knew, and so yes, I think it's wonderful that you are doing this.
I really want to say thank you for doing
Yes.
this. It's just special. Really.
We're spreading the word about you.
It's just wonderful.
My father always wanted to honor his father in some way and talked about the Indiana State Museum and the Historical Society. It didn't exist yet, I think, here. But I feel especially pleased because it's like doing something in our generation that he wanted to do, and they all did probably wanted to do so badly. So that's really appreciated.
It seems as though we had to go several years. We had to get older to focus on what the drum factory was. Growing up, we didn't really know much about it because it was still so present. But now you step back from it and it takes on a whole new meaning.
And you're bringing that to the attention. I think it's important that they know what's been in Indianapolis. And this is a pretty important part of, and the way you're depicting it is great. I mean, you're walking literally through the years. I think you're showcasing it in a nice way.